Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with a director and writer. His credits include Field of Dreams, The Sum of All Fears, and The Angriest Man in Brooklyn. We're pleased to welcome Phil Alden Robinson. Phil, thank you for doing this.
Yes, welcome.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you both.
This is great.
Roger, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I was on the Board of Governors, wasn't it? We met there, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah. We'd like to start with our normal question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Is this something that you thought you wanted to do as a kid, or did you follow another path and then find it? What's your story?
I wasn't a film buff as a kid. I was very interested in politics, and I wanted to be a journalist. And I went to work in college at my college radio station and then at a local radio TV station as a newscaster. And I thought that was just the career path for me. I loved it. I made a documentary at the station, and that got me really turned on to longer form, the plasticity of media and how you could move an image and it would change its meaning, or you would put different sound on it, it would change its meaning. And I gradually got to feel like I wanted to work on a bigger canvas. I came to California and I worked in educational films and corporate films and training films and educational TV, really, really boring stuff for a long time. All the while thinking that somebody in Hollywood would see this and say, "Hey, you there, you're pretty good, come work with us." And of course that never happens. They're not looking there.
But why Hollywood? Were there films that you watched at that time when you moved to LA that inspired you to go into, that kind of filmmaking?
What actually brought me to California was I went into the Air Force after college in lieu of being drafted, and I made training films for the Air Force. And the headquarters of the Air Force filmmaking unit was in San Bernardino, which is about an hour and a half east of LA. It's not a very exciting place. So every weekend I would drive into LA and I would go to movies or go hear jazz or see friends. And when I got out of the service, it was just the logical thing to do was move into LA and freelance. I'd heard the word. I didn't really know what it meant.
Yeah.
It meant being unemployed.
Yeah, right.
So how long did you do that?
I did that for 5 or 6 years. Well, in the Air Force, it was about 3 years. And then in LA, it was probably about 5 years. And when I finally realized you can't get there from here, I did what I should have done 5 years earlier, which is, write a spec screenplay and just start from scratch.
Was that like the first time you'd ever written anything, or did you write stories for the news and stuff?
I had written as a journalist, and I had written and directed these little training films, but I'd never done anything. I'd never written a screenplay, and I didn't know anything about it. And I remember my first draft, I have it somewhere. The first draft, the format was all wrong because I didn't know how to do it. And it's a Western, and it starts with a meeting. The governor this corrupt governor of the Wyoming Territory is having a meeting with his corrupt henchmen. They get up from the table on page 28. And I remember thinking, oh, this is good. It'll start slow and build,
Yeah. Have you ever worked on it since? I presume it never got made.
It never got made, but I spent years honing it to the point where it got me my first writing job in television as a writing sample. It was a TV series called Trapper John, M.D.,
Right.
which was a 1-hour spin-off from MASH. It was a hospital drama. A wonderful man named Don Brinkley was the producer, and he read this script of mine, and although it was nothing at all like his series, he said, well, this kid can write, so let's give it a shot.
Wow.
Bless his heart.
Since you were interested in politics and journalism in the beginning, did you ever think that you'd want to make political films? And did you feel that films could portray a political viewpoint and get people to see it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think everything I've written, well, not everything, most of what I've written has politics at its heart as subtext. And I did write, I wrote a spec that I'm still trying to get made. It's about a political campaign that I had been collecting stories over the years from friends in politics. And I still have high hopes that that'll someday get made. But yeah, politics, it's a passion of mine. And now it's so bizarre. And this spec that I've written is actually sort of an absurdist comedy about politics. And I fear that reality has overtaken me and that the script is no longer as absurd as real life.
Not as funny. Yeah.
So your first film as a director, I mean, you always wanted to move into directing rather than just writing, or?
I was very happy when I started as a screenwriter. I was getting a lot of work, and I was very happy with that. I had 2 films in production at the same time. One was All of Me, that Carl Reiner directed, with Steve Martin and Lily Tomlin. And Carl was very generous, just said to me, stand next to me from the first day of pre-production to the last day of post. He says, you just stand next to me. And I was treated with respect and lovingly, and it was just so gracious of him and the whole cast. At the same time, a script of mine called Rhinestone was being made and rewritten by the Star.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, I'm being treated as badly and as well simultaneously as a screenwriter can be treated. I think I prefer this one. But I understood that I couldn't always get that situation. You're at the mercy of who they hire to make the film. And I just didn't want to be at their mercy. The studios, the grown-ups are not always reliable.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, the next thing I write, I have to direct. And my agent understood that. And I was offered a film to write at Lorimar. It was called The Woo Woo Kid. It was based on a true story. They sent me they sent an article to my agent who said, this is something I think you'd like to do. I said, great. Can I direct it? He said, no. I said, then I'm not interested. He told the studio, they came back with a bigger offer. They thought I was negotiating.
They always do that.
And I said, no. They came back. They offered more money because All of Me at this point was very well respected and it was a hit. And they kept offering more money. And finally, my agent said to me, now you're being rude. He says, at the least, you should just read this article and then say, hey, I've read it and I'm not interested. So I said, fine, send me this stupid thing. And they sent me the article, and I got about 2 paragraphs in, and I called him. I said, you got to get me this job. I love this story so much. And I wrote it. They offered it to every director in town, living and dead.
Wow.
And couldn't find anybody. And I kept saying, hey, over here, I want to do this. You've never directed anything before. Well, Steve Martin was then producing a TV series, so he hired me to direct 2 episodes. And then I went back to Lorimar and said, okay, I've directed. And they said to me, oh, this was a terrible meeting. They said, so what films do you see this being like? And I mentioned 2 obscure, artsy little independent films that I loved. And they said, neither of which made any money. And I said, I'm sorry. It's a cross between The Godfather and The Exorcist. I didn't know it was a trick question, So finally they ran out of other options and they said, okay, you can direct it. And this was great. You'll appreciate this. Having made lots of deals in your lives, they said to me, okay, we don't have time to negotiate, so we're just going to make you an offer and it's going to be take it or leave it. And I thought, fine, it's got to be at least scale. So I'll take it. I'll do it. They said, here's our offer. We paid you a lot to write this. Let's call it even.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what do you mean?
Wow.
And they said,
wow.
Just take it out of what we paid you to write it. I said, no, I'm a member of the Directors Guild. You can't. They said, well, don't tell the Directors Guild. I said, why wouldn't I tell the Directors Guild?
Oh my gosh.
So finally they said, okay, scale. And scale for a director is 8 weeks of shooting, 2 weeks of prep, 1 week of post. That's what scale is. So I was paid for 11 weeks, and I worked a year and a half, and I went broke.
Right.
And I remember my business manager calling me saying, you have no money. And I said, I just directed a Hollywood movie. How can I have no money? That was my introduction to directing.
But was it a fun experience? Was it a good time on the set?
It was often a good time on the set. I learned a lot. I was too dumb to know how big a film this was. It had 95 sets and 85 speaking parts. Wow. And it was period.
Oh, my.
And it was like a $5 million budget. I mean, it was really, but I had someone that you know well, Dennis Gassner was my production designer.
That's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And did a spectacular job. And it's the first film that I worked with John Lindley as DP, and we've since made 4 films together. So I was surrounded by really, really good people, which I've come to learn is the trick. And we were moving too fast for me to be angst-ridden. You know, I got plenty angst-ridden on the next film, but this one I was just, it was such a whirlwind that I kind of woke up when it was over realizing what just happened. You know, it was so fast.
And what was the cutting experience like, being in the cutting room after you didn't get that shot or did get that shot? Right. What was that like?
Glorious. I love editing.
Yeah.
I remember the last day of shooting, my friend Robert Harmon, who's a very good director, came by the set to say hi. And he said, so how's it been? And I said, I think I didn't get anything like I had in my head. And he said, you never do. And he said, and I know now it's an exaggeration, but the point was well taken. He said, you make the film in pre-production. You design the film in pre-production. In production, most of what happens is you see your vision get whittled away. Yeah. And in post, you put it back together again. Now, I've since learned that production isn't quite that destructive. It's fabulously inventive and productive. But post-production, every day the film gets better. You know, it's like every day that pause is gone, and this shot has been replaced by the better one, and this camera move doesn't bobble anymore because we've taken that. Every day it gets better, and I loved it. And I remember the very final day of post-production, because I got so focused on it. We had a test screening the night before, went very well. We had 3 changes to make, and the editor made them, and I sat in front of the flatbed, and he showed them to me, and I said, I'm sorry, could you play that again? And he played it again, and I said, I'm sorry, could you play it one more time? And he looked at me oddly, like something was wrong, and he played it again. I said, I'm so sorry, but I can't see it. I don't see it. He says, that's because you're done. It's okay. Go home. I had stopped being able, literally, I had so much visual information coming to me for months and months and months. I just couldn't see the change.
Yeah.
It was such an odd experience.
Yeah. How much was the final product as you imagined in pre-production? You're talking about, you know, the pre-production is, as Denis Villeneuve says, is your one chance to really dream what you really want, and everything else is compromise.
Is reality.
I wouldn't say everything else, because often things happen on the set that are just gloriously wonderful. Magic. It turned out to be quite like I imagined it would be, but I could only tell that years later. For years after I finish a film, I still see all the things I wish I'd done differently. And when I watch the film, I remember where I was standing when we shot that shot. I remember, I was on the left of the camera there. Oh, I was over here, and the monitor was behind me. I remember all that stuff specifically, and it's hard for me to see the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's one of the great challenges of filmmaking is how do you actually see it?
Yeah.
To know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember after...
I think that's why it's really good that an editor is removed from the actual, day-to-day production and can look at the footage with a fresh eye and not tainted by, I didn't get that, or this is not
or this
quite
shot took 8 hours.
Or this shot, took us all day. You've got to use it, sort of thing,
I remember showing John a rough cut of the film, and we got to a sequence and I had cut a scene out. Yeah. And he said, "Oh yeah, that was after a second meal."
Yeah, right.
It always is.
Yeah. After Field of Dreams, I was very disillusioned with my being a director because it was very hard and it was emotionally challenging, and I was not sure I wanted to do it again. And I took a year off, and I went and talked to Sidney Pollack, who I respect as much as anybody. And I said to him, "Do you ever get what you have in your head?" And this was his answer. He said, "Never, never, 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 never. Not in pre-production, not in rehearsals, not on the set, not in dailies, not in the editing room, not in the mix, not in the final print, never." And I thought, wow, if he doesn't, then I shouldn't beat myself up.
Yeah. Well, actually, Bob Rafelson told me I was working with him. He said, beware if a studio ever give you everything you want, because then you'll have no excuses.
Absolutely. Well, that was one of my big problems on Field of Dreams. They said, here's the budget you asked for, here's the cast, here's the crew you asked for, now go make this movie that you've been shooting your mouth off about all these years. And I realized for the first time in my life, I didn't have an excuse. On Woo Kid, which was released as In the Mood, I had an excuse. We didn't have enough money. We didn't have enough days. I was my first time. This time I was terrified. I really came face to face with my own fears and my own inadequacies and my own insecurities.
But isn't Bob was really saying that if you've got to overcome something, if you don't have everything you asked for, then you've got to find some way of doing it to get what you want as best you can. He was really saying that kind of always fighting to get something against some.
Well, it makes you think and be more creative to get around it. We always say with limitation comes inspiration. Because you have to figure out how to get the scene.
I mean, Field of Dreams, you could say in one sense seems fairly simple. It doesn't have a million characters, but I mean, it's actually very difficult to shoot in a cornfield and, a baseball scene in a cornfield in the middle of the Midwest and not on a set and no control and all the rest of it. So why did you choose that project? I believe you wrote a script from a book, was it?
I had read this book that I literally couldn't put down. I read it in one sitting. I was just so mesmerized by it. And I thought, wow, what a movie this could make. And it turns out there were very few of us in Hollywood who believed that. Everybody else said, you can't make a movie out of this. It's crazy. And it took a couple of years to get someone to say, okay, go ahead and write this. It was Larry Gordon at Fox. And after I wrote it, because I had made a couple of fundamental changes to the way the story was told, people could then see, oh, yes, this is a movie. And it was very quickly set up at that point. But the challenges, they're so kind of subtle. They're so unexpected. I thought, well, this is going to be simple. We're out there with nothing to distract us. We have night scenes on a farm. There's no phones ringing. There's nobody. Turns out, if you turn lights on a cornfield at night, every bird, insect, and cow for 50 miles thinks it's daytime. We had to loop all the night scenes on the ball field.
Wow.
It was so loud. Yeah.
Wow.
And corn, there's a shot, the first time Ray goes to the window of his bedroom and looks out at the cornfield. We had this beautiful shot from inside the house, and John had these Musco lights and gave a moonlight glow to the cornfield. The corn just sucked the light up, and you couldn't see it in the dailies. We had to do that again. And he was very apologetic. He said, I'm so sorry. He said, I had a lot of light on that corn. It just ate it.
Yeah.
Wow.
What was the schedule like?
I think we had 64 days, something like that. It wasn't bad. It turned out to be very difficult for weather reasons. We wound up shooting during the worst drought in 50 years. And nobody in Iowa had corn.
Right.
And Dennis, God bless him, Dennis dammed up a creek, and we trucked in water. We built an irrigation system. And Dennis put a hold on literally all the fake corn in the world.
Wow.
He found people in Japan and Korea who had thousands of stalks of fake corn. He had a hold on all of it in case our corn didn't grow. Wow. He was prepared to create an artificial cornfield.
Wow.
I read somewhere also you were painting the grass green of the baseball field.
Yeah. We had a great we had a great guy who does the grass at Dodger Stadium and the Rose Bowl, and he laid the sod. And he said to us when he finished laying the sod, he says, "Now you got to stay off this for 2 months." I said, 2 months? Tomorrow morning, we got a whole crew on this thing. He said, "You're going to kill the grass." I said, "Well, help me out here. What do we do?" He said, "You do what we do at Dodger Stadium the night after a rock concert the night before. We paint the grass." So our standby painter had these big tanks, big industrial tanks of green dye. And every morning he'd go out and it's not a field of dreams, it's a field of dead grass. It's he's out there painting every day.
Wow.
And Dennis, the other great thing Dennis did was I found a color that I wanted the base paths to be, because the dirt in Iowa was a dull brown. Mm-hmm. And I found a color swatch. I said, I want the base paths to be that. And he spent weeks experimenting with different combinations of ground up brick and dirt and whatnot. And he got exactly the right color. It was just great.
So you said it was very stressful. What else was kind of stressful? I mean, you said the first film you did, In the Mood, was kind of quite a happy experience, but Field of Dreams was more stressful.
I would say, starting with the issue that you raised about you have no excuses if it doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. The other is I had in my head a very expressionistic use of the camera. And when we got there, I discovered I didn't know how to do that. Now, the interesting thing is, I think I know now, and I think I would have ruined the film if I had done it that way. I think the very simple, straightforward approach was right for this film, because we're asking the audience to swallow a lot of fantasy and go on faith a lot. And I think that if it looked like I was trying to manipulate them visually, they may have resisted. I think this very matter-of-fact approach gave them some comfort in a way that I only understood in retrospect. But every day at Dailies, I would come home and want to open my veins. I was so depressed at how plain it seemed to me.
So and I remember, can you describe what you were imagining then, what you were going to do with the camera? I mean, was there a filmmaker or a film that you had in mind?
Steven. I wanted people to say, God, this is, even Spielberg couldn't have done this, And I'll give you an example. The scene where Burt Lancaster, as the old doctor, crosses the base paths, the young boy, Moonlight Graham, crosses the base paths and turns into the doctor. I had imagined something where we'd be low and he would pass through lights and there would be some sparkle or something, and it'd be magical. Well, Burt Lancaster was very difficult, and it wasn't all his fault. He was old and in poor health, and I think it was a very hard shoot for him. And by the time we got to that scene, I just wanted to finish him out. And I didn't want to take time setting something up. So I said, we're just going to do a match dissolve as quickly as possible. Turns out that was more effective than what I had in my, some ILM effect. And all through the film, I remember going home at one night at Dailies, so sad, so depressed, that I went to sleep and I had a dream that people were trying to get into my bedroom, and I pulled out a shotgun and I killed them all in the window.
Whoa.
And I realized, boy, I got a lot of angst going on inside me.
Yeah, wow.
It was, I came to the set one day, I couldn't breathe. I was having a panic attack in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, if I could draw breath, I would tell my driver, take me to a hospital. I think I'm having a heart attack.
Wow.
I couldn't breathe. I was so overwhelmed with, how are we going to shoot this scene? It's too much. I don't know what I'm doing here. And I got to the set 5 minutes of 7, and I didn't go anywhere near anybody. I went up on the ball field and I sat in a chair. And I can see 100 yards away, everybody's in the parking lot getting their breakfast. And the assistant director, Bill Alden, is walking towards me. And I loved Bill. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. But I was hoping that the earth would open up and swallow him before he got to me. And he came over to me and he looked at me and he said, "You look particularly bad this morning."
Oh, good beginning.
Yeah. And I just said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what. He said, just one shot at a time. You've got a plan. We're shooting on the bleachers, 6 pages with people getting up and moving around. The coverage was changing a lot. And I had a plan, but every time I'd say, let's do this shot, John would say, there's a cloud coming. Did you want to get a 2-shot of them on page 4? We threw the shot list out the window and we're just moment to moment based on the sun going in and out of the clouds, picking the next shot. And I remember shooting a close-up of Amy Madigan, and she was always perfect in every take. She got it, and I said, let's do one more. And we did one more. And I said, something bothered me. I said, let's do one more. She said, what's wrong? I said, I don't know, just humor me. Let's do one more. And we did one more. And then I remembered. And I went over to her and I said to her, we did this close-up yesterday, didn't we? And she said, yes. And I said, I'm so sorry. I'm just hanging on by my thumbs here. Yeah. And she said, thank you for your honesty. We know.
I got to tell a story because you can get so into it, you forget, right? I was going to work one day with the director and he said, the studio's pressurizing. I've got to cut a scene out. I've decided to cut the scene out where the helicopter lands, blah, blah, blah. And I turned to him and I said, we shot that yesterday. It was a whole scene.
And the helicopter.
He was under so much pressure from, the grown-ups. And it's quite understandable. I mean, I get that completely. I get it my own way. And anyway, but yeah, it's sometimes you're so in the moment, you forget what was yesterday or, yeah.
But you have to actually be in the moment.
Yeah.
In the moment, but also you have to have part of your brain is thinking about, if I don't get this by lunchtime, I'm not going to be able to get that after lunch, and I'm behind. We wound up going almost 2 weeks over schedule, and we went right up to Kevin's stop date. He had a contractual stop date. It was nervous making it, and Larry Gordon, who was the producer, called me one day, and he was very encouraging. He always said to me, he said, I understand you're disappointed with dailies, but, I make action films, he said. He says, we go to dailies in the action, and you say, okay, that explosion is exciting, and that gunfight is going to work. What you're doing, you can't tell from the dailies. You won't be able to tell until the film is finished, and it's mixed, and the music's in. So just trust the fact you're shooting the script. Just keep shooting the script. Late in the shoot, he called me one day. He says, I know I told you to shoot the script, but now I'm telling you, shoot the schedule.
A big part of directing is also casting, right? And knowing who would work or not. So what was your approach for the casting of Field of Dreams?
I had some very specific things in mind, one of which is I wanted the role of Ray to be an everyman. I wanted people to relate to him. The studio wanted a comedian. And I said, no.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, you can't do that because it changes the audience's expectations of the movie. I want somebody for whom hearing a voice and acting on it is the last thing on earth they would ever do.
Right.
Right. And I actually had a line in the script very early on when he says, till I heard the voice, I'd never done a crazy thing in my whole life. And I thought that was the key to the character, that he'd never done anything crazy. And we didn't even have Kevin on the list because he had just made Bull Durham. And in those days, I'm sure you remember, baseball was considered absolutely non-commercial. 2 baseball films was suicide. It was career suicide. So we didn't have him on the list. And then one day, an executive at Universal ran into Kevin at a restaurant and said, we're doing something I think you might like. And he sneaked in the script. And Kevin said, I like this. And when I heard that, I said, wow, let's get this guy. And we met for breakfast. And I said to him, I want to make something that somebody can say that's the best film I've ever seen. And he said, I love that kind of talk. He said, let's do this. And then he said another great thing to me. He said, you will feel a lot of pressure from within and without to make changes. I'll be the guy standing behind you saying, don't change a word.
Great.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Which was a huge confidence boost that this big star, my previous film had come out and made lunch money. So to have this huge star say that was really fantastic. And he was true to his word.
Yeah.
You talk about changes. You said from the original story, the original novel that you adapted, what changed? What did you change from the novel to the big screen, as it were?
The biggest change is in the book, the father showing up is not a surprise, and it's not the ending. We know he's coming, and he shows up 2/3 of the way through. Really, all I did, and I say all I did, it's a little bit of exaggeration, but basically the big change I did was I made it a surprise to the audience and to Kevin, and I made it the end of the movie. So the movie becomes, in a way, a mystery. And the ending is the resolution of that mystery. Other changes in the book, the James Earl Jones character is literally J.D. Salinger, who had threatened to sue if anybody exploited this book. And also, I didn't want to do J.D. Salinger. I thought, you'll know the expression, putting a hat on a hat. One too many crazy things for the story.
So what made you go for James Earl Jones?
I was writing pale versions of J.D. Salinger. I think that it was like LP Messenger or something like that. And it was uninspired. And I was in New York and I saw Fences on Broadway. And it's one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. I remember coming out of that saying, that's a man, And I came home, I thought, that'd be interesting. Kevin has to kidnap this guy. So it should be a big guy, a big, powerful guy. I said, wow, I'd love to see someone have to kidnap James Earl Jones. And we sent it to him, and he told me later that he read it, he liked it very much, and he said to his wife, there's a speech in here about the meaning of baseball in our lives and our memories. And he said, that kind of thing always gets cut out of the movie. But I want to take this role because I want to play that scene. And I know it won't be in the final movie. And the day we shot that scene, he told me that. He said, I know this won't be in the final movie. I said, they'll cut off my arm before they cut this scene out. Are you kidding me? He was wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great performance, actually.
It's such a lovely guy, too.
It's one of those things you kind of think who else would have been that role. It's like, it was so perfect.
I know. He was just wonderful. And the day we shot that scene, he said to me, and this was late in the schedule, and one of the things that emotionally got me through that shoot, with all my angst and all my self-doubt, was, boy, the last week of the shoot, I get to stand on the set and watch James Earl Jones just let it rip, just roar these words out. And the day we shot the scene, he said to me, Phil, I don't want to preach the scene. I don't want to be big. I want to just say the words. And my heart sank. I thought, no, don't take that from me. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, I think it's egotistical. I think I just want to say the words. So I said, okay, because an actor like that, you trust, And he did it beautifully. And it was the right decision. The next day, he came back to do his off-screen lines as we were doing reaction shots. And he said to me, I feel kind of bad I didn't get to preach this. Would you mind terribly if I did it off screen? I said, mind? No. Please, have at it. And all I could tell you was that the Iowa sky was filled with James Earl Jones preaching this. It was fantastic. It was great. Would have been wrong for the movie,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was like a gift. It's like
You
he gave us all a
experienced it.
gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was wonderful.
So the film's like really successful. I can't imagine even you had imagined it would ever be so successful as it was. And then you gave up directing for a long time. Tell me about that. That seems kind of weird, really.
I had such an emotionally difficult time dealing with my own fears and doubts that I thought, I'm not sure I want to do this again. It's too hard. So I thought, well, if I'm not going to direct, do I want to write again and have somebody else direct? And I wasn't sure I wanted to do that either. So I thought I need to take some time and think about my life and what I want to do. I got offered everything immediately. And I just said to everybody, I'm taking a year off. Call me in a year. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to think about movies. I'm not going to write anything. I'm not going to have any meetings. Someone said to me, how can you walk away after a hit? And I said, no. How could you walk away after a flop? If it had failed, I would have felt compelled to get back on the horse and prove myself.
Yeah.
This proved something, but I wasn't sure it proved what I needed. I wasn't sure. So I took a year and just had a life. And I traveled and I went to baseball games and I saw my friends and I played with my dog and I just read books for fun. If an idea for a movie came to me, I would lie down till it went away. I was religiously out of the business. And at the end of the year, I realized, okay, if a movie could possibly mean as much to me as that one did, it's worth it. And I felt that because I went to the theater a lot and watched it with audiences. And as you know, you can experience it through their eyes. You can't really see the film the way they see it because you know too much. You somehow go through them, you feel what they feel. And I thought, it meant so much to so many people, and that meant a lot to me. If there's a chance of doing something that will mean that much to me again, I would do it. But I'm just not ever going to take a job for the sake of having a job. And I remember telling that to Sidney Pollack, and he said to me, God, he says, that's so smart. He says, I always take a couple of years off after a film, but it's not a decision. It's my own indecision. You know, he said, what I should do is take a year off and study Sanskrit or something, really use that year. But instead, I funk around and I read things, I take meetings, and I'm not ready to go back to work, and I just waste that time. I felt like I didn't waste the time. I learned a lot. I learned enough about my relation to this career. It sort of sustained me for the rest of the career, that, okay, this is the deal I'm making with myself. It's got to have a chance to mean that much to me. Doesn't have to be deep dish, doesn't have to be serious. Just has to have the chance that when it's done, I can say to myself, God, I love that film. And that someone else could say, I love that film. And so the next thing was Sneakers, which is certainly not it's not Field of Dreams in the sense of it's how it emotionally affects people and changes their lives. But I love that kind of film. And I thought, yeah, let's make one of those for us.
Did you feel even more pressure because Field of Dreams was so successful and so it's still so revered? I mean, there's a pressure you've got to live up to it somehow.
Right. I kept saying to myself, how do you follow that? And then one day I realized you don't follow that.
Yeah.
You just do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
And were you writing, though, in between? As you weren't directing, but were you writing?
That first year off, I did not write a word. What I did do when I came back, I had already written for years with Walter Parks and Larry Lasker on Sneakers. We'd already spent 6 or 7 years writing many, many drafts. So I said to them, hey, let's finish Sneakers. And it's not for me to direct, but because I think there are people who do this kind of thing really well. I was thinking John Badham, guys like that, who do what I call the shiny stuff really well. I said, let's finish the script. And Walter said, well, why don't you direct this? No. We'll get somebody better for that. And we finished the script, and he said to me, okay, I know you don't want to direct this, but just for the sake of discussion, under what narrow circumstances would you direct it? And I said, well, and I gave him a whole list of criteria, and he immediately called the studio and said, okay, we can get Phil. Just give him his cast, his budget, this and that, shoot it in L.A., and they met all my conditions, and I was directing another movie.
You're stuck.
And was it a good experience?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it a lot more because I went in with much lower expectations of my ability to enjoy it. I had the cast that I wanted. It was a glorious cast. I loved that cast. And it was fun to be on the set every day to watch them work. I had my crew, the same crew from the last film. We got to shoot most of it in Los Angeles, so I got to sleep in my own bed, which, as you know,
It's wonderful.
nothing better. Oh my God, it's great. And I had fun. And I had fun because I thought, I'm going to push myself a little more. Let's not do the very simple approach. Let's kind of have some fun and be a little more stylish. John and I talked about the shiny stuff as my kind of way of thinking about the film. It didn't necessarily mean shiny surfaces, but it had to do with sort of both the look of the film and the feel of the film should have a glint to it in a way. The other thing we said to each other was, let's make a pact, no bad shots. Because as you know, in every film, in every film, with the greatest of intentions, you always wind up one night, you're stuck, and the only coverage you can shoot is that guy has to be standing in a corner against a blank wall. And you go, damn. We ran up against that one night. We're shooting in Stephen Tobolowsky's apartment. He's making dinner for Mary McDonnell. We're shooting in a real condo somewhere in the valley, and we wound up looking around the room, and we looked at each other and we said, uh-oh, bad shot. We were behind, and I said to him, we're not giving in. We got to figure this out. And John said, I wish there was another light source. I said, it'd be great if the table that they're sitting at was a light table. If there was a light in the table. Without even a discussion, he turned around and said to the key grip, build a light table. The gaffer came in and says, I've got these tubes, and the guy said, I've got this wood. And within 45 minutes, we had this beautiful piece of furniture that glowed up. Now, the audience doesn't care, but we felt like it was such a win. You know, it just buoyed us for the next, week or two.
That's great.
So I've got to ask you, I'm really intrigued. So the kind of films you've done mainly, and the ones you've written, out of them all, the Sum of All Fears seems to stand right out. And the title there, The Sum of All Fears, seems to refer to your reaction from directing. Why that film?
Well, I think the big question is, why would they hire me for that film? And I still don't really know the answer to that, because my agent called me one day and he said, Philip Noyce has dropped out of the next Jack Ryan film. Would you be interested? And I said, God, I love the Jack Ryan films. I mean, I just love those films. They're exciting, they're smart, they center around a character and not necessarily around explosions and things. I said, there's no way they're going to offer this to me. He said, no, they want to meet with you. I said, nah, that can't be. And he said, no, they want to meet with you. And I said, do me a favor, call Mace Neufeld, who's the producer.
Oh, yeah.
Ask him if this is just a courtesy meeting. We don't have to waste each other's time. It's all right. And my agent called back and says, no, he says it's real. Now, I don't know if he ever talked to Mace or not, but my agent said, no, they really want to meet with you. So I went in to meet with John Goldman, who was head of the studio. And I'm driving in, I knew I can't talk about visual effects because I don't know anything about visual effects, and I can't talk about action because I don't know anything about it. So I went in and talked about character. And I said, there's a moment in the first Jack Ryan film where Alec Baldwin is hanging from a helicopter in a storm in the North Atlantic, slamming up against the conning tower of a submarine. And he says, I should have written a report. And I said, that's the guy. I want to make a movie about that guy. And everyone in the room said, oh, yeah. We forgot about that. I ad-libbed a scene. I said, like when he's flying to Russia, he has to break a date with his girlfriend. He calls her from the plane and he says, I'm in the CIA and I have to do it. And she goes, that's so lame, and hangs up on it. And everybody laughed. And I thought, okay, so I got to laugh.
That was a really good scene because it's Morgan Freeman, right? Suggest, why didn't you tell her you're in the CIA and you're on the way to Russia? and Morgan does it so well, doesn't he? Yeah.
He should. He does everything so well.
Yeah, doesn't he?
And by the time I got home, my agent said, I don't know what you did in that room, but they want you to do the movie.
Wow.
So Sherry Lansing was back in town the next day, and they said, go see Sherry. And I went in to see Sherry, whom I knew. And I remember I walked in her office and I said, are you nuts? Do you want the nice, gentle Tom Clancy film where the audience says, oh, that was so sweet? And she laughed and she says, no, but I'll tell you what I don't want. I don't want action sequel number 7. I want this to be about the characters, and I want it to be smart and about the politics and have some humor. And I said, if you really mean that, I'd love to do this. I think it'd be great. She said, all right, we've asked Ben Affleck to star in it. Why don't you go to New York and meet with Ben? If you guys like each other, you're doing the movie. And the next day I was in New York meeting with Ben. It's impossible not to like him. He's just the loveliest guy. And we liked what each other had to say about the character and about the movie. And, a few days later, I was scouting locations. So it happened very fast. I'm still not sure why she took that leap, because it's so out of my ken. But that's the most fun I've had directing. And I think it's because I didn't write the script. I did some work on the script, but I didn't write the script. And I remember saying to myself, okay, for the first time in your life, you're not trying to protect what you wrote. You're there as a director. You're there to add. And so I looked at it in a different way. I looked at it as additive, and can I stretch my wings such as they are as a director? And I had so much more fun directing that movie.
Oh, wow.
Did you feel you had enough, you could add yourself to it? It's those sort of films, I mean, there is a lot of action and it's so plot-driven. Right. Did you feel you could add as much of yourself to satisfy you in the end with the final film? I
felt that I did, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the character was no longer the middle-aged, high-ranking officer. It was this new kid who was in over his head. I can relate to that. And what I loved about Ben's performance is that it was egoless. He was willing to be the kid who's in over his head, who doesn't know what he's doing. I thought that's what's fun about the story. I could key into that. I felt like I understand this guy, and I can work with him on that. There were problems to solve that I really was proud of our solutions. And I'll give you the big example is, how are we going to show the explosion? A nuclear bomb goes off in a city. I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want a big wide shot and a bright flash and a mushroom cloud, because it's obvious. It's a dishonest point of view, because if you could see that, you'd be dead or blind. And it risks being pornographic. It risks, we're Hollywood. We could make that look incredible. And the audience would go, wow, you got to see the scene where the bomb goes off. And that's not what I wanted people to feel. I wanted them to feel gut punched. And so I looked at a ton of footage of real nuclear tests and the Hiroshima footage. And I realized that the most impressive shots were not the bomb going off. It's the shock wave miles away, flattening buildings and trees. And I thought, let's not see the thing that killed people. Let's see how it affected the survivors. And I thought, wow, well, we have survivors. We've got the president, we've got Jack, we've got his girlfriend. So then we said, all right, we're going to set up these scenes to show how they're each hit by the shock wave or whatever. And each of them had massive technical issues to be solved. And that was really fun, because you get the visual effects people and the DP and the special effects people, everybody working together, coming up with solutions to these things. And I was really proud of that sequence, because it had more thought behind it than an explosion often does.
But it must have also been a challenge, because didn't you have second units and visual effects? And so that requires you to think, you've got to think story, but you've also got all this logistical things that you have to keep track of. Didn't that make you nervous?
Yeah. In a word, yes. I was nervous, but I had such good people doing these things. The second unit did stuff that was far better than I would have shot. There's a couple of shots in there that when I saw them, my heart just leaped when I saw those things. And now this raises an issue that, Roger, I want to talk to you about. You're the first guy to really use bleach bypass as a choice. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, really, yeah.
So I said to John Lindley, when the bomb goes off, the world changes. It's a different world, and I want the world to look different. And he said, okay, what do you have in mind? I said, the air looks different. And he laughed, because it's one of our little private jokes whenever I say to him, why can't you just light the set without the actors? Just do it now. He says, you can't light air. So now I said to him, I want the air to look different. And he said, okay, let me do some tests. And he came up with bleach bypass as one of his choices, I'm sure, from... Which is the film? What you did it in?
I did it on 1984, but after that, it was used a lot. I mean, Clint Eastwood used bleach bypass all the time. It was a different process called E&R, but it was basically the same idea of leaving the silver crystals in the emulsion.
Right.
But for later films, it could be done on the negative. We could only do it on the print. That was the release prints. Yeah.
Well, we rolled the dice. I mean, he showed me tests on the negative, on the print, and I said, "Wow, it looks much better on the negative." And he said, "Okay, but here's the thing: you can't control it. You don't really know what you're going to get till you get it, and if you don't like it, there's nothing you can do." I said, "Let's just do it." And he said, "Whose permission do we have to ask?" I said, "I'm not asking permission. No one's going to give us permission to do that." So we just did it, and it looked great. It looked exactly different, and it looked like the world had changed. And one day, the lab had to reprint something, and they send a report to the studio post-production person saying, "We reprinted the bleach bypass stuff," and he hit the roof. And he called Mace. He called Mace Neufeld, and he's screaming at him, "Bleach bypass!" And Mace says, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Call John." And he called John Lindley. This guy is yelling at him, saying, "You're fucking with my negative." And John, who is the coolest character in the world, said, "Sir, everything I do is fucking with your negative."
Oh, very good. Very good.
It's good.
Oh, I wish I could have done that. I've had those conversations with people in production as well. Yeah, because they really don't like you doing that. Anything
really
out of the
didn't
ordinary.
Yeah. So we got away with it. Now, many years later, when the fourth generation of high def gets made, and they're going to make a new transfer of the film, they run it through a computer to clean things up. But John and I went in to give the final touches. They had cleaned up all the bleach bypass.
Yeah.
So we had to put it all back,
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the problem, too, of not doing it on the negative, on doing it on the prints, because then, for instance, in 1984, for years and years and years, it was released on DVD and VHS.
Yeah, it was all full color.
Full color, and looked wrong.
Because it wasn't on the negative, it was only on the print, and nobody used the print as a reference. So it wasn't till Criterion did a re-release in 1984 that we actually could make it look like the original film. So it's kind of a long time later.
Those computers that clean things up often make a mistake. The first time they did it to Field of Dreams, they clean up all the dirt on the negative. So any little speck gets cleaned up. Well, anytime someone hit a baseball, it was gone.
Of course, right. Oh, no.
I wanted to ask you, Field of Dreams, but also Sum of All Fears and stuff. I mean, the way technology has changed now, a huge amount of what you shot on either or both films could now be done in a computer. All the cars you've got the town to come out at the end of Field of Dreams for that helicopter shot, you could have just done that in a computer in 5 minutes with no cars. How do you feel that's impacting the way films are, the kind of feel of a movie?
I think they do that stuff very, very well, but we know that they do it very well. And so my pulse does not quicken when I see an action sequence the way it used to quicken when I knew that they were actually doing that physically.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're losing something. I don't know that we get it back by physically recreating those moments, because we know too much now. As an audience, we know they can do anything. And so things don't surprise us or move us the same way. And I regret that. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't know that.
Well, I think what you were saying about the way you shot the bomb in Baltimore, you don't need to see the whole thing. But there's such a pressure now because they can do it that you do it. Like we were on a film and the studio wanted a shot outside of the scene. So there was a whole computer-generated shot from an objective perspective, and it had nothing to do with the way we'd shot the scene, which was with the character. And it just takes the air out of the scene, And it's because you can do it, they want to do it. But I think, as you say, if you've got the kudos as a director to say, no, I want to stay in and just see the after effects of the bomb going off, it makes a big difference.
But do you think that audiences nowadays, if you do try and shoot a movie that way and have it happen off screen, which can be more powerful, but do you think audiences will feel cheated because they wanted to see that explosion? They wanted to, because they're used to it. I'd much rather not. I think there's more tension.
I think there were character reasons for doing it this way, and I think that
right.
ultimately is what moves an audience is character. I think you can still do that. I always think about, and you were talking before about limitations, it gives you inspiration. I always remember the story about Spielberg not being able to shoot the shark, so he shot the buoy.
Yeah.
Rising up in the frame, and all the things about the shark that make you feel its presence but not see it. It's much scarier. It's so much better that way.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's changed. I think you can still do that and have it mean something to the audience.
But do you think it is done? Because it seems like a lot of the movies that we see nowadays are more explicit with the visual effects and everything. So I don't really see that kind of movie making in a lot of movies.
No, and I suspect that has a lot to do with the decision-making process of what movies to make.
Yeah.
They're making, and I don't want to single out Marvel, but Marvel movies is sort of a paradigm for what gets made, and they rely on that stuff. They rely on, and some of them actually have some very clever dialogue and some wonderful characters. But if the audience doesn't get their fill of explosions and action and daredevil stunts, they feel cheated.
Right.
That's what's getting made. And I think it's something else I want to talk to you about. I think that's one of the reasons that this notion of doing everything in one shot is so appealing now, is because it's a way around that in a way. And what you did in 1917 is now people are doing it on television all the time. Adolescence, which I loved. It's a way of immersing us into the story and being with the characters so intimately that you don't need the explosions. You feel what that character's feeling. The Studio, that new series, Seth Rogen, they just did a whole episode about a filmmaker doing a one-shot thing, and that episode is all one shot.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun.
Oh, that
and
is
so
funny.
in a funny way, it's no longer quite as special as it was when you did it, because it's being done a lot. But I like it. I like feeling that immersion with the character.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying about the studio on this one particular film wanted to do this objective shot of the scene and not stay with the character. And there's something about, being with the character and a claustrophobia that you feel with the character, and you don't allow the audience to any relief, because it's a relief to go to a wide shot or go on any cut is a relief in a way, because it takes you out of that character's perspective on things. It's interesting. I really wanted to ask you, I don't want to go on too long, I guess, but I really want to ask you, I read you worked for the UN High Commission on Refugees and did some documentaries for ABC Nightline. Can you talk about that? What was that?
Yeah, I had finished Sneakers. I was going to take another year off to decompress. And I got a call from somebody at the UN High Commissioner for Refugees who said, we're putting together a relief mission to Somalia. This was in 92. Would you like to go as an observer? And I said, sure, because I just wanted to shake up my life. I want to do something different. She called the next day and said, on the way back from Somalia, we made a stop in Sarajevo, and the war was about 6 months old at that point. Would you like to go to Sarajevo? I said, yeah, fine, whatever. I really wasn't thinking about anything except, let's get out of the house and do something different. She must have then spoken to someone who knows me, because she called back on the third day and said, you understand we're going to have to sleep on the ground and the food isn't good. And I said, yeah, I get it. And then I started reading up about the war in each of these places, and I got nervous. And I remember something that a wonderful cameraman friend of mine who just passed away named Eric Saarinen had told me. He said, when my eye is to the eyepiece, I'm not afraid. He said, I'll hang out of a helicopter. As long as my eye is to the eyepiece, I'm good. So I went to a camera store and I bought a little video camera. And I thought, as long as I'm filming something, I will be able to emotionally deal with the horrors that we're going to see. And they told us, you're going to see people dying on the street. And I had no plan. I just took the camera with me as a security blanket. We went to Somalia. It was an extraordinary experience. Went to refugee camps and out into the wild and saw people, literally, you see dead people in the street. And I remember going into this little makeshift clinic. It was a bombed-out building that were using as a hospital. And I walked in. It was very bright outside. It was very dark inside. And I went in filming, and neither my eye nor the lens had adjusted to the darkness, so I couldn't see anything, but I could hear someone dying. I could hear the death rattle of somebody who's taking their last breaths. And finally, the iris is open, and I can see this person lying on the ground, dying. Every bit of me wanted to flee. I wanted to just run out of there. And I kept saying to myself, just keep shooting, just keep shooting. This is why you're here. Keep shooting this. That made me think, okay, I'm going to use this. I'm going to do something with this footage. It's not just home movies. I've got to do something. We went to Sarajevo. I had an extraordinary experience. The city was still being shelled. I saw a performance of the musical Hair in the middle of shelling, and I filmed that. And I just thought, this is interesting stuff. And I came back to LA, and a friend of mine was working for ABC, and she said, Nightline might be interested in the footage. And she spoke to the producer, and they said, yeah, send us the footage, and then we'll cut it together, and we'll interview you. And I said, I could be more articulate if you let me cut it, and I'll narrate it. And they said, fine, whatever you want. And I did 2 from that trip that they ran as on the air. And it made me feel like, yeah, this is why I got into this in the first place, was my journalism instincts. And the freedom of not having anybody around, not just crew, but assistant, nobody. It's just you and your camera. I've never felt so alive. Now, part of that is being in a war zone makes you feel that. But also the freedom of being able to shoot anything and rely on your own instincts and your own judgment at every moment without having to arrange something so that everybody else is in sync. It was so liberating. I loved it. I wound up doing 3 more for Nightline over the years. And I just felt like it was important for my soul to be able to, every once in a while, get out and do something. I went to Sarajevo 2 more times during the war. Actually, once more during the war than once after the war, right after the war. Because I fell in love with the city. The people were extraordinary. They have a great film festival. If you've not been, it's a wonderful film festival. And what they do is so smart. They have a music festival that starts every night at midnight during the film festival. Wow. So you see films during the day, you have the ceremonies, and at night it's just the whole town parties. It's great.
Wow. Well, think about that one. Do you think, I wanted to ask you about that, because my own feeling is that films don't have such a place in society now, dealing with issues like Somalia or Sarajevo, whatever, larger issues. I mean, how do you feel about that? Is it just me feeling cynical about filmmaking today?
No, you're right. I mean, I don't know the place in young people's hearts and minds that films occupy, but I'm pretty certain it's not the same as when we were growing up and when we were coming of age. They have so many other things like video games and the internet and TikTok, and I fear that it all comes from kids aren't reading books, and they're not learning the patience that's required for a really full meal of a story and fully fleshed out characters. And they're now satisfied with TikTok videos as snippets of things. That satisfies it's like the difference between junk food and a nutritious meal. Junk food's very appealing. And I fear that the movies that are getting made are not, some of them I think are fantastic, but an awful lot are clearly not being made by people who grew up reading novels. And they don't know what a fully fleshed out story requires, and the weight you have to give different things, and the complexity that characters can have, that every character can have.
Do you think in some way these limited series on television is allowing for a little bit more of a character arc, because it is a longer period of time, but you've broken it down into pieces so people can sit for that hour or whatever and come back and see more of this development?
Absolutely. And that's what the 2 projects I'm working on now are both limited series, because one, because I don't think people making features are looking to me for what I do, because I don't I didn't read comic books as a kid. I'm certainly not going to read them now. And limited series is where I think a lot of grown-up storytelling has gone. And some of them are just spectacular. They're just wonderful. And I'm sorry when they're over. The trap is they now want them to be longer than they need to be.
Yes, yes.
What I'm finding is
Yes.
so many series, I say, I really like this, but boy, it would have been so much better if it had been in 4 episodes instead of 6.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're watching it, you're aware, you're going, boy, that scene didn't have to be there.
Yeah,
We've already done this.
Stretching this one out. Yeah.
But,
Absolutely. There's a little padding going on,
Yeah, which is a shame.
It is a shame, but I find that I'm looking to limited series more for my nourishment than theatrical feature films, which is sad to me.
Yeah.
It is. But maybe that's just the change. I mean, we feel the same way, really.
And it's great, though, there is some place where you can follow, be with characters and see a character go from one point to another and to change in a way that you wouldn't have expected, but because you've been with that character, you believe. I love that.
Exactly. I think the industry learned the wrong lesson from Star Wars. Star Wars changed so much. They thought, oh, you have to make a big event. You've got to have special effects. No. You have to have great characters. You have an idealistic young knight, a princess in jeopardy, a cynical warrior. They had the best characters on the screen, and Hollywood drew a different lesson. And we're still living in that world, I think.
Yeah. That's really true.
What advice would you give to somebody starting out who wants to kind of become a writer, maybe write in film or television?
Read novels.
Read novels.
I think it's the mental exercise of learning patience and seeing the long view of a story and the complexity of characters. I just think that's great underpinnings for what we do, because what we do is so economical and so concise that if you go into it saying, well, all I have to do is write 120 pages, economically, I've done it. No, you have to think of something that could be 300 pages.
Yeah.
And turn it into 120 pages. And then also just watch the great films and be critical and think about, why is Lawrence of Arabia so brilliant? There's a lot of reasons. But it's story and character and a director and a cinematographer and a designer with a vision. And the care that goes into those films. One of the things that always amazes me whenever I talk to anybody who's worked on a film is when they tell you stories of something that looked so simple and how hard they worked to make it look that simple. I spoke once with she was a location manager in Africa. And she had been Lean's location manager on Lawrence. And she said, one day he gave me a bottle of sand and he said, find me the desert that color. And she looked all over the world till she found the desert. That was in Spain, it turns out.
Wow.
But that's a level of caring and specificity that you have to make a great work of art like that. And nobody in the audience ever thought about that. But it's integral to the mindset of making something great. And I fear that working on TikTok videos doesn't give you that mindset.
Yeah.
I would also say experience of life as well. I kind of feel there's a lot of people around that are kind of making films based on films that are based on films. And not
absolutely
life,
right.
Yeah.
Sidney Poitier said to me when I told him I was going to take a year off after Sneakers, he said, good. He said, we pour into our work from the cup of our life. And when the work is done, you have to refill that cup, and you can't refill it with work. You have to refill it with life.
That's fantastic. That's a really true thing.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. That was a really lovely last statement.
Well, I enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah, we did, for sure. Yeah, it was wonderful talking to you.
Great fun hanging with you. Let's do this every day.
Yeah, right.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.teamdeakins.com. rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.